We are Jonathan and Carla James, and we'd like to tell you a little bit about our story. I was born with severe hemophilia A and grew up with a lot of bleeding episodes internally. It was not something that my family had a history of previously, and so it was brand new diagnosis for us. Through the years, I grew up with having bleeds regularly, going to the emergency rooms before we had at-home treatment, and just suffered with a lot of internal pain and difficulty, a lot of mental struggles as a result of just the emotional burden of going through so much pain. In the 80s, there was contaminated blood supply that caused there to be a lot of infectious disease that was transferred to most of the people living with hemophilia. And I was a real rare and very fortunate to not have contracted HIV or hepatitis C, even though I was exposed what they believe was hundreds of times through the years. You look somewhat normal on the outside. People look at you and think, well, there's nothing really wrong. But inside there's a war that's just raging. You're dealing with a lot of pain and mental anguish because of it. And so I was athletic in terms of wanting to play sports, but that just was not an option that was really afforded to me because of my health. And so I became really, focused on music and getting involved in that. And so at one point we relocated from Texas to Louisiana because of my insurance needs. And when we relocated, I went to a new school and started getting involved in singing and performing arts. And it became a real opportunity for me to find a lot of enjoyment in something that I could be competitive in, and ended up getting a lot of scholarships in that process and went on to college. And so I found new and discovered new gifts and talents that I might not have discovered otherwise had I been forced, had I not been forced to look for alternatives.
Some very, very dear friends of ours introduced us, and actually we had mutual friend groups. Almost all of our friend groups were mutual, and everyone would say, oh, have you met this guy Jonathan? You just love him. I just know you guys would be perfect together. And they would tell Jonathan, have you met that girl Carla? The girl with the long blonde hair. And for a couple of years that went on, and all of us just kind of out of the blue really noticed each other. And I had only heard about hemophilia through watching a TV program about Ryan White when I was a kid. And I mean, always, my whole life had such compassion for hemophilia through that one show that I watched. So we started dating, and Jonathan was talking about how he decided he was never going to get married. And I was ticked. By this point, I already knew that he was the one. Every time I looked at him, I just knew that that's where my future was at. And so I said, well, that's not your decision to make. Whoever you decide to marry will have to have worked through that with the Lord themselves and decided for themselves whether or not they could handle hemophilia. He said, I don't want to bring someone into hemophilia and the pain and struggles that this causes. And anyway, so I was ticked, and that was the day he asked me to marry him. We got married, and we lost our first baby, and then had a very difficult time getting pregnant, and we're told we weren't going to be able to have any more children, and then they just kept coming, and so we ended up with 4 kids in 5 years. Jonathan had started his own business, and I was very big pregnant with our 4th child unexpectedly. His elbow was really suffering from the joint damage from playing sports as a child, and his ankles, one which was partially fused, the other one which needed to be fused, was really giving him a lot of trouble. And then he ended up in the hospital with a lung bleed, and shortly after that he ended up in a wheelchair. So I was taking care of 3 toddlers. I was pregnant with our 4th baby and taking care of my husband. People started surrounding us, and that's really how hope began, was the surrounding of a community of people that we knew, people that we loved, people we didn't know and didn't know us. One of the most difficult things for me was trying to figure out how we were going to pay our bills. And someone mentioned going to a place that helped pay your light bill. So I went. I was desperate for any help that we could find. And I sat down, and they said, well, do you have a job? And I said, I was a little stunned. I said, I mean, my husband is ill. He's had these surgeries and he's in a wheelchair, and I have 3 little toddlers, and I'm about to have another baby, and I that is full-time work. I can't work an outside job besides this, and they just gave me the 3rd degree and made me feel very ashamed, like I had done something wrong to put us in that situation. I remember walking out of there and just saying, I hope I get the chance to help someone, to help other people someday, and to help them with honor and dignity, and not make them feel like it's their fault that they are in this situation, not make them feel ashamed.
It was a very humbling season in general. I had been a professional, had a career, and here we were, still had blown through all of our savings in a few months. I actually went 21 months without a paycheck. We'd applied for disability and gone through the process, and it just seemed like we were declined for everything, one thing after another, after another, after another. People started to share our story to some of the people in our community through our church and through our, just the community that we lived in, and they started to find out that we were going through this difficult season. And we were so fortunate because so many people started to go out of their way to try to help us. Some people we knew, but some people we didn't know. And we had people that would come by and pull a bill out of the mailbox and actually pay it before we had even had the chance to open it. We were just desperate. And we've got 3 littles at home, another one on the way, and I'm like, my business had been declining severely because I wasn't able to work. We got to the place where we just didn't even have food to put on the table for the kids. And so we're desperate. And so finally, I'm like, I'm just doing anything and everything I can to try to survive this. So one morning, I find out that the food stamp office opens up. I've never been through this process before. I don't know how it works. And so I see people forming a line, so I get in line. And while I'm standing there, I start to hear all of these people sharing their stories with each other, and it's just overwhelming. I'm just standing out here going, man, these are my neighbors. These are people that I live 20 minutes away from or 30 minutes away from, and these people are really suffering, and they're normal, everyday folks like I am. I came home that day from the meeting, and I told Carla, I said, one day when we get out of this circumstance, I hope that when we get on the other side of it, I could take $50 gift cards or $25 gift cards and just show up there in the morning and just go down the line and hand out. What's really beautiful about that is that today we literally do that and help people that are suffering with hemophilia in the same manner. So we're going through all this, overwhelmed by all these people that have surrounded us, and I get a phone call, and I was actually getting ready for surgery. I was at the hospital, I was at Tulane, and a friend of mine called me and he said, hey, we have some friends that decided that some business owners that want to donate some money financially to help you and your family out, and we're going to do a foundation in your name. It's going to be called the Jonathan James Foundation. And I said, whoa, I don't know about all that, but I said, look, one day I really believe that I'm going to be out of this situation, and I hope to be able to use this as an opportunity to help others. And so I said, let's name it something different. And we talked about it back and forth some, and at the time we decided to name it Hope for Hemophilia because we really wanted to be able to help other people in the future. That little bit of encouragement, honestly, about starting the organization gave us hope that we could help others through our struggle. It carried us. I mean, it gave us really inspiration to keep pressing through our own challenges.
Knowing that we weren't alone was why we say that so much about Hope Charities now. And even then, from the very beginning, we wanted people to know that they weren't alone because we realized we had community. We had friends, we had a church, we had a community. We had friends who had friends who had friends who were coming to help. But that's a rare situation, I think. There's not a lot of people who have a community like that are willing to jump in and surround a family.
For us, I just feel like that we have made a significant impact by helping people financially, and that's one of our big goals as an organization today, is to continue to give to people in practical ways through financial assistance. But we also see a big part of the work that we do and the impact that we're making is equally as much about that encouragement that people gave to us.
It's really, really incredible to see what Hope to this day has been able to do. We're literally watching this team of people grow, not just locally, but teams all over the country of families giving to families and watching things that we only had in our heart and in our mind, could only dream that one day we might be able to do. We're watching hope demonstrate to people and live out to people. Everyone has a story, and the chapter that you come into someone's life is usually not the chapter that their story started in. They've got a whole past of a story, and they've got a future, and they need to know their future is possible, and that, you know, sometimes all it takes is just, let me just help you get through this bump in the road. Sometimes a chapter is just a bump.